Hello, slimy fertilers. Now I'm quite sure that we are all aware of the events that happened over the weekend in Charlottesville and the carnage that that ensued over it. But do we know the full story? Well, Vox Media seem to think they do. This is why I'm taking a little break from Justin bashing to just have a little listen and a little look at what Vox Media thinks is going off. So let's get on with it.
The weekend of August 12th, a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia descended into violence. On Friday night, white nationalists attacked counter-protesters.
Indeed, they did. The white nationalists attacked the counter-protesters. However, what she doesn't mention is that the counter-protesters also attacked the white nationalists. Furthermore, it's very telling of this particular person's bias straight away, and we're not even 10 seconds into the video yet, that she lumps everybody together in the group known as white nationalists. Not all the people that were there at the protest were white nationalists. Certainly the rally was organised by white nationalists, and you had white nationalists, you had neo-Nazis, you had Ku Klux Klan members turn up. As well as that, you also had people who were interested in preserving history, people who objected to the vandalisation of monuments and stuff like that. So to group them all together and call them all white nationalists is rather naughty, considering this is supposed to be, unbiased reporting. But then again, it's Vox Media, so, she doesn't mention either that the counter-protesters were mostly made up of members of the known domestic terrorist organisation known as Antifa, as well as other people that were there. And let's be honest here, both sides, both of those groups that were involved in the fighting turned up armed. So it's not like they were peaceful by any means. Let's carry on.
Blood and soil! Blood and soil! Blood and soil!
And on Saturday, a woman named Heather Heyer was killed when a man purposely drove his car into a group of counter-protesters. In response, President Trump blamed both sides.
Yes, he did blame both sides, and with good reason to, because both sides were responsible for numerous acts of irreprehensible violence. And yes, indeed, one person was killed by direct action by a man who is suspected to be a white nationalist or neo-Nazi of some description, who deliberately drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters and killed somebody by running them over, injured 19, I believe, as well. But basically the narrative that she's trying to spin here with the story, especially with the extremely sympathetic treatment she's given to the counter-protesters, is that they turned up. And none of them were armed. Not one of them had any weapons on. None of them were wearing, all black and chanting, anti-white slogans and things like that. None of them at all. They were so peaceful. Oh, they were so peaceful. And these horrible jackbooted Nazis came marching along with their Nazi uniforms and their Nazi helmets and their Nazi guns, and just set about these poor peaceful protesters. We all know that that's bollocks. We've all seen the footage. We've all seen members of Antifa wearing their all black uniform, masked up, throwing bricks, hitting people, using weapons on people, improvised weapons. Weapons are brought with them, the usual stuff, chains and pieces of wood and stuff like that, signposts and whatever, chucking bricks, bottles, and all things like that. But then again, on the other side, we do have the white nationalists who, some of who turned up carrying guns, but then again, in the state that they are in, they are entitled to do that. They're entitled to own weapons, and they're entitled to open carry them. So, you know, they will perfectly win their rights to turn up with firearms. There's nothing illegal about that. But on a side note here, I would just like to address this journalist that we're dealing with here. She's a lady by the name of Dina Lars, I think it is, something like that. I just need to check my fucking thing again. Yeah, Dara Lind, that's it, not Dina Lars. Just look at the picture we've got here on screen. So the thing that bothers me about this is she's basically narrating this story, and just look at the way that she's narrating it. She's speaking to the camera, and she's got her head tilted in that condescending way. Her voice shows no emotion, very softly spoken and everything like that, which she's telling a story. She's not relaying information, she's telling a story, she's spinning a narrative. And this is quite literally one of the faces of modern journalism. It's not to provide reports on things, it's to provide narrative and opinion. Now, I did a little checking up on Dara Lind, and I found her LinkedIn profile. And looking back at the employment that she's had, she's basically always worked in media studies. She isn't a sociological. Can't get my words out, oh dear. She isn't a sociological expert. She's neither a historian or anyone who is, pretty much up on current events. She is basically a communications executive. So she's good at telling stories, and even her profile says she calls herself an explanatory journalist, which is basically newspeak for I tell stories. So this is the kind of caliber of reporting that we're going to be seeing, from the mainstream media, or media that has a left-wing bias. I'm sure we're all familiar with it now. But anyway, let's carry on with the video and see what else happens.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
He didn't call out the white supremacists by name.
Niet, comrade. Neither did he call out the other side, either the regressive leftist cultural Marxists, simply because there was no need to. He'd have been there all day condemning, white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, cultural Marxists, regressive leftists, basically the entire alt-left and alt-right, because both of them are just as bad as each other. They are both heavily identitarian, and they were both involved in violence. Nobody knows exactly who it was that threw the first punch, or brick, or whatever. And likely we'll never know. However, it's not fair to condemn one side when both sides are involved in it. Like I say, the attempt to spin the narrative that that the counter-protesters were all peaceful and none of them had hurt a fly. It's just a lot of shit. We've all seen the footage.
He didn't acknowledge that they were the ones who had initiated the violence.
Nein, das ist, weil es keine Beweise dafür gibt, dass es die weißen Nationalisten waren, die Gewalt auslösten.
Or engaged in the lethal violence that killed Heather Heyer. Instead of assuring people that these groups are dangerous and wrong, he actively misled people about what happened in Charlottesville.
What, you mean like what you're attempting to do right now?
He implied that the white nationalists and the counter-protesters were equally to blame.
That's because they are.
That hate was a 50-50 split.
We must love each other, respect each other, and cherish our history and our future together.
Very wise words there from President Trump. I really don't know why the regressive leftists and members of Antifa can't respect that concept.
All of this stands in stark contrast to the rhetoric he uses when he talks about terrorists who are Muslim.
Oh, those poor Muslim extremists. Oh, I feel really sorry for them, having their rights to ram planes into buildings and detonate suicide bombs in crowded places and run people over in trucks. You know, that's that and what happened in Charlottesville are two completely different things. Islamic extremists are determined to completely destroy the Western way of life and implement a global Islamic caliphate, whereas the people of Antifa are basically wanting to, well, more or less install a global communist collective, whereas the white nationalists and stuff like that are seeking to make a whites-only state or eradicate all non-whites or something like that. But when was the last time a white nationalist crashed planes into buildings? When was the last time an Antifa, member blew themselves up in the street? And I would say, when was the last time, either of them used a vehicle to run people over? But they did that on Sunday, and it's a suspected white nationalist that did it, and the bastard deserves to be put to death for what he did. But to create a little straw man there is quite frankly pathetic, and it just goes to show that the entire point of this piece is nothing more than to, basically have yet another dig at President Trump for not declaring his undying loyalty to the communist state.
Radical Islamic terrorists are determined to strike our homeland, as they did on 9/11, as they did from Boston to Orlando to San Bernardino. An Islamic terrorist turned his truck into an instrument of mass murder. Radical Islamic terrorists. And she won't even mention the word. We cannot let this evil continue.
Trump doesn't have a problem calling people out by name. The family of a dead U.S. service member, the cast of Hamilton, Meryl Streep, Barack Obama, John McCain, just to name a few. But Trump's vague and tepid response to the white supremacists in Charlottesville wasn't just annoying or misleading. White nationalists took it as a sign of tacit approval.
There she goes with the fucking condescending head bob again. Do you know, if she puts her head any further down, she'll literally have her forehead scraping against the floor. Right, where to begin? All those things that Donald Trump actually said there were true, and you can put Islamic extremists or Islamic terrorists into one catch-all bundle, quite simply because all Islamic terrorists that plan and carry out terrorist attacks worldwide are all Muslim extremists. Okay? That's why he has no problems about, making rhetoric, as she calls it, or whatever, about Islamic terrorism. It's a clear and present threat to every single country in the world that is not part of the Muslim world. And then she goes on to say that, because he didn't outright condemn, white nationalists, that they've taken it as approval. No, he didn't condemn white nationalists because of the simple fact, as has been said before, both sides were to blame. If he just went and said, if he'd have said, yeah, these white nationalists need to pack it in or whatever, then the fucking Antifa lot would have taken that as, approval from the president to carry on doing what they're doing, which is rioting, criminal damage, assault. It's one of those things you can't win. He just can't win. It didn't matter what he would have said. He wouldn't have been able to win. He doesn't condemn the white nationalists. They take it as approval, even though he's been quite clear that he doesn't support white nationalists or neo-Nazis or Ku Klux Klan members, white supremacists, anything like that. He's been very clear about that. And he's also been very clear that he doesn't support, the ultra-leftists either. If he'd have condemned the white nationalists, Antifa or whatever, would have taken that as a victory. if he condemned the ultra leftists and whatever, the white nationalists would have taken it as a victory. It doesn't matter. It's a literal no-win situation, and I think he's dealt with it very, very well, to be honest, despite the stuff and the lies that have been said about him.
A post on the white nationalist site The Daily Stormer praised Trump's lack of condemnation, writing, accurately, that when asked to condemn, he walked out of the room. Trump did the same thing during the campaign.
Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
All right, yeah, get him out. Try not to hurt him. If you do, I'll defend you in court. Don't worry about it.
He refused to condemn violence at his campaign rallies. In fact, he offered to pay legal fees of people who beat up protesters.
Yeah, you do realise that when he made some of those comments, he was actually joking, don't you? What am I saying? Of course not. You ultra-leftists don't have a sense of humour.
Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise.
Do you believe that you've done anything to create a tone where this kind of violence would be encouraged?
I hope not. I truly hope not. I will say this. We have 25, 30,000 people. You've seen it yourself. People come with tremendous passion and love for the country.
He refused to condemn supporters who beat up a Mexican man in Trump's name, saying that his followers were very passionate. He refused to condemn the self-described alt-right, an online movement that's dealt increasingly in white nationalist rhetoric and tropes.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. First Amendment text adopted in 1791. That's why he doesn't condemn people like Richard Spencer, because even though Richard Spencer and all that lot are a bunch of cunts, they are entitled to say what they like without fear of condemnation from either the legal system or from Congress or from the President himself. Donald Trump has been very clear on his stance on the rights to free speech and everything like that, and he has in fact gone out of his way to not condemn people for exercising that right. They'd soon be moaning if the state did decide to start clamping down on free speech, because a lot of the stuff that the left says, as well as the right, would get smashed down immediately and people would start getting locked up en masse. Somehow, though, I don't think that's the kind of totalitarian state that the leftists are quite looking for.
While claiming to be simply trolls and provocateurs.
The Trump guys, the alt-right, the Twitter kind of meme and troll brigade.
You're a white supremacist until people start chasing you and then you took the uniform off. So are you going to put it back on? Or put it...
Quite honest.
Yeah.
I love to be offensive, it's fun.
Look, in the streets, it's impossible to tell the difference between someone who's giving a Nazi salute ironically and someone who's doing it in earnest. And at a time when the people doing it in earnest are engaging in physical violence, those who claim they're doing it ironically don't appear to have any problem with the confusion or fear they might cause.
Alright, so, and that makes it okay to just, assault somebody, then does it. Right, okay, well, you heard it here first, folks. If anybody does anything and you don't particularly like it, feel free to kill them. Or at the very least beat them senseless and probably put them in a coma or something. It's fine in the leftist utopia. If you don't like people, then, just do what you feel like to them. It's all fine, it's all great, Obviously, of course, if they decide to then come and kick the fuck out of you, you can't moan about it. There's nothing there, because obviously you're responsible for another person's feelings. Right, well, that's basically the end of it. She just goes on for another few seconds to explain that, by not condemning one side, you're giving credence to the other side and providing no emotional or stability or whatever to people who might have had the feelings hurt by something. Yeah, fuck it. As usual, link to the video will be in the description down below, and yeah, This is the standard of journalism to come from the future generations. No actual news content, just a bunch of lies, half-truths, misrepresentations, and half-baked opinion. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God.